Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to dive into a story that's, well, it's a bit of a wild ride.
Oh, yeah, this one's a classic. Buckle up.
We're talking about the Millwrights in 1844. Now, you might have heard about this.
Right, the whole great disappointment thing.
Exactly. But we're going deeper. We want to understand, what led to this moment and what happened afterward, because it's actually pretty fascinating.
It really is. It's about how faith evolves, even when things don't go as planned.
Okay, so imagine it's 1844. You're part of this group, the Millwrights, right? And they're totally convinced that Jesus is coming back, like any day now.
And not just convinced, they were living it, selling their possessions, giving everything away.
Wow, talk about commitment.
They even gathered in white robes, ready for the big event.
Wild. So then what happened? The date arrives, 1844 comes, and nothing. No Jesus.
Right. The disappointment was huge. I mean, can you imagine?
Absolutely. I'd be devastated.
Yeah.
So what do?
Well, they could have just given up on their faith, right? But instead, they actually doubled down.
Really?
Yeah, they started studying even harder, trying to figure out what went wrong.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
They must have been searching for answers.
Exactly. And where did they turn? The Old Testament sanctuary? It was like they suddenly saw it with fresh eyes.
The sanctuary? Wait, so like the building with the rituals and all that?
Yep, that's the one. They started to see these amazing parallels between the earthly sanctuary and what they believed was happening in heaven.
Okay, hold on. I'm intrigued, but I'm going to need you to break that down a little.
Sure. So in the Old Testament, the sanctuary was this really important place, right? It was where the Israelites went to atone for their sin.
Right, and they had all these specific rituals they had to follow.
Exactly. But the Millerites started to see that those rituals weren't just empty actions. They were like symbols pointing to something deeper, a spiritual reality.
So they thought the earthly sanctuary was like a model of what was happening in heaven.
Yeah, like a blueprint. And they realized that just as the earthly sanctuary needed to be cleansed, so did the heavenly sanctuary.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
Yeah.
But how does this tie into Jesus and his second coming?
Well, they came to understand that Jesus' work didn't end with his ascension. They believed he was continuing to minister in the heavenly sanctuary, and that in 1844, he entered the most holy place to begin a special work of judgment.
A judgment. Whoa, okay, things just got real.
It did, and this new understanding, well, it changed everything.
So 1844 wasn't a failed prediction after all. It was the start of something else entirely.
You got it. They went from expecting a physical return of Jesus to understanding a much bigger cosmic process.
This is heavy stuff.
It is. It really is. And it's just the beginning of the story. All right, so let's dig into this whole investigative judgment thing.
Yeah, I have to admit that phrase makes me, a little nervous.
I get it. But the Millerites didn't see it that way at all. They actually saw it as something positive.
Positive. How so?
Well, they believed that this judgment wasn't about punishment, but about, making things right.
Okay, but still, judgment. It's hard to see that as a good thing.
Think of it less like a courtroom and more like, well, a cosmic audit. It's about confirming the choices people have already made.
A cosmic audit. Kind of like that.
Right. So it's not about God deciding who's good or bad. It's about recognizing the decisions we've made and the paths we've chosen.
So how did they connect this idea of judgment to the sanctuary? You mentioned those rituals they were studying.
Oh, absolutely. The sanctuary was key to their understanding. They were really drawn to the Day of Atonement described in Leviticus.
Ah, yeah, I remember that. It was the day when the high priest went into the most holy place to make atonement for the people's sins.
Exactly. And the Millerites saw a parallel between that earthly ritual and what they believed Jesus was doing in heaven.
Okay, I can see where they're going with this. The earthly sanctuary as a model for the heavenly one.
Precisely. They believed that just as the high priest cleansed the earthly sanctuary, so Christ was cleansing the heavenly sanctuary.
Interesting. But how do they apply this to 1844?
Well, they noticed that the Day of Atonement ritual had two phases: cleansing the holy place, which happened regularly, and cleansing the most holy place, which only happened once a year.
I see. Two phases, different levels of cleansing.
Right. And they believed these phases mirrored Christ's ministry. First his work on earth, and then this new phase in the heavenly sanctuary, which they believed began in 1844.
So 1844 wasn't a failed prediction, but the start of this heavenly cleansing process.
Yes. And they believed this cleansing involved, removing the record of sins.
Hold on. Removing sins. Did that mean they thought everyone was just automatically forgiven?
No, not at all. It's not about erasing choices. They believed that the sins of those who truly accepted Christ, who followed him, those sins would be blotted out.
So it's more like their sins are removed because of their faith and commitment to Christ.
You got it. And they believed this process, this investigative judgment, began in 1844 based on their understanding of Daniel 8.14, a prophecy about cleansing the sanctuary.
Okay, so this judgment is happening now in their present, but what does that mean for everyone else? And what happens while this judgment is going on? I have so many questions.
I bet. And we've got some answers, so let's keep going, shall we?
All right, so this investigative judgment is going on. It's a process of, like, cosmic accounting. But how did the Millerites actually live with that knowledge?
Well, for them, it wasn't about just, sitting around and waiting. They saw it as a call to action. Like, okay, God's reviewing the books. Time to get my spiritual house in order.
Makes sense. If you knew someone was checking up on you, you'd want to make sure everything was tidy.
Right. It spurred them to really examine their lives, to confess their sins and make things right. They took it seriously. They knew God was merciful, but they also knew he was holy and just.
So they felt a sense of urgency, like, this is important, I need to get this right.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about personal piety either. They also felt this incredible responsibility to share this message with others, to warn them about the coming judgment, and, more importantly, to point them towards the hope of salvation through Christ.
So they went from this crushing disappointment in 1844 to this whole new movement focused on preparing for this judgment.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. And it's a reminder that sometimes, even when things don't go as we expect, God can use those experiences to, deepen our faith and understanding.
It's like that saying, when one door closes, another one opens.
Exactly. And sometimes the door that opens leads us to something even better than we could have imagined.
Absolutely. This whole story is a testament to the resilience of faith, Even in the face of disappointment, there's always hope.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about the Millerites, about the investigative judgment, and really about the nature of faith itself.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's amazing how these historical stories can still speak to us today,
Absolutely. And that's why we do these deep dives, to uncover these hidden gems of history and faith and see how they connect to our lives.
So if you found this deep dive intriguing, we encourage you to, keep exploring.
Yeah, do your own research. Dig deeper into the Millerite movement and their understanding of the sanctuary and the investigative judgment.
And be sure to check out our other deep dives for more fascinating explorations into history and faith.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.